Welcome to Small Practice Support Information Session 26. In this Law Society of Ireland recording, David Rowe talks to Justin Purcell about buying and selling a small legal practice.
So you're very welcome to Small Practice Information Session 26, buying or selling a small legal practice and what to consider. So I'm here with David Rowe. David, you're very welcome.
Thanks,
I know
Justin.
this has been a hot topic at the moment. Yes.
Thank you for the invitation.
You're very welcome. So David is a chartered accountant with a primary degree in law, so he's well qualified, and he is one of the Law Society's regular experts in this area and is on the panel given to practitioners looking for advice on buying and selling or valuing a practice. So David, you're very welcome, and you'll take it away. We'll take questions via the chat. I think, David, you're going to talk for circa 20 minutes, and then we'll take questions and answers for the last 10 minutes. Is that all right?
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Look, it's a fairly short session, so I'll keep going on this because we don't have a huge amount of time. So thanks for the opportunity, Justin, and I will know a lot of the people that are online. So look, let me just take you through the trends in buying and selling practices. So I suppose the value of practices has fallen quite significantly over the last 20 years or so, but we've had some recovery with the recovery in the economy in the last 5. And one of the issues is always that the vendors are kind of still stuck sometimes in the values that were there 20 years ago. And I find if I take somebody on as a vendor, it can be quite difficult to bring them into where the market is now as opposed to where it was. So how do you value a legal practice? Really, it's a matter of negotiation, but there are definitely ground rules. And the ground rules at the moment are that anybody buying or selling a legal practice would expect to, I suppose, do the following. One, any work that's finished stays with the vendor. Any work in progress, that's work that's part of the way through, will be split between the purchaser and the vendor. So a live file will be split when the money comes in between the purchaser and the vendor. There's various ways of doing that. We probably don't have time to go through that today. And then you're into, is there any value plus or minus in terms of goodwill? And people, I'm on record as saying 5 years ago, and I still get it quoted back to me, that there's no goodwill in an Irish law firm. There is goodwill, and it's a function of the market, and the market is now paying a small amount of goodwill to a vendor, depending on the qualities in the practice. And we're going to have have a look at that at the moment. I think COVID-19 has had a couple of unexpected effects on the market we're going to look at. And I mean, I'd say in general, there's a very active market at the moment. There's a good market for both vendors and for would-be purchasers. Probably this year to date, we've probably done about 30 transactions. So, for either representing the vendors, representing the buyers, or, sometimes people ask us to just do person in the middle type valuations. So if you're looking at a practice, or indeed if you're a vendor, when will goodwill apply? So if you like, goodwill it's the purchase price above the assets and the liabilities that you would be taking over. So when are you going to pay a premium for a practice, or when should you pay a premium or get a premium? So the following feed into it. If we have a good PII record, that's become even more important. Justin and I were just chatting there before the session started officially about this year's PII renewal. And that's probably elevated having a good record compared to where it was 2 or 3 years ago. Well, really, if you had a couple of notifications or claims, it didn't have such a bad effect as it is having at the moment. It has been a very difficult year. Other things that a would-be buyer are looking for is a steady turnover. So we're not up, down, up, down, up, down. There's a steady return. Now everybody understands that a large litigation case or a large probate could land one side of a year end or another. We're looking for a wide spread of clients. So it's probably a little bit of a danger sign for a buyer if a lot of our eggs are in the one basket or in relatively few baskets. So your typical private client practice will have a wide spread of clients that pop up and do things occasionally. They buy the law firm, you know, at 5-year intervals or 10-year intervals or 18-month intervals. If there's a large key client, I mean, obviously or indeed source of work, migrating that relationship over is really important. Pardon me. We're looking for repeat type of practice. Practices that have strong probate. What do I consider strong probate? Anything above 15% of fee income is a good probate practice and a good will bank. You know, a lot of the practices that are for sale are first generation, and ironically, the practitioners that are selling them won't see the value in the probate, and it'll be for the people that come behind them. You know, that's saying to you a little bit, if you're buying a practice, there's probably, you know, a second or third generation practice, if you're looking for probate, is probably even better. And then obviously having decent future instructions. I like nothing less than going into a practice, I sit down opposite a retiring practitioner, and he or she says to me, you know, I've kind of stopped taking work in at the same rate, you know, as I was previously. In terms of selling, that's a disaster. So any buyer ought to look at what work is on the blocks at the moment. So that's where we get a premium on the practice. Where do we get no goodwill or reduction? Okay, if it's some of the opposites of those, if the fee income is very inconsistent or lumpy, if the practice is very personal, and particularly, I suppose, if the practice has aged with the owner in terms of its contacts, they may not migrate from a 65-year-old to a 35-year-old all that well. If we have PI issues, if we have non-repeat income, if we're pricing either too high or too low, are both a problem. Too high because you know, the buyer is going to worry that he or she will not be able to get the same level of pricing from clients. Too low is an equal problem because the buyer will rightly think that they will never be able to push up the pricing with this portfolio of clients. They've been spoiled with low pricing. If we've service issues, so, you know, like it's a very small market. It's really easy to check out anecdotally whether X or Y or Z has given good service and is known. You know, everybody, we all have a stock in the market, and we're known, and it's very easy. If I get an instruction, it's very easy for me. It's one of the first things that I look for if I get somebody coming to sell a practice. What's this person's reputation in the market? Because if it's not good, then it's going to be very hard to sell that practice, and I end up wasting time and, you know, whatever. Or if the practice has waned or the owner has run it down. So there where a reduction would apply. I mentioned PI, professional indemnity insurance, earlier on. Again, we could spend a whole lecture on this, but there are two situations. One, the person that is selling winds it down and goes into the runoff fund. They're not actually selling their practice, they're selling files. There's a whole pile of restrictions on a new owner taking that over. In fact, a new owner really can't take it over, can't hold themselves out as a succeeding practice. There's a lot of disadvantages in terms of transfer of clients. There are some advantages, significant advantages, in terms of non-transfer of professional indemnity insurance risk. That's the route that you go if you're looking at a practice that has a checkered history potentially in terms of its notifications and claims on professional indemnity. Most firms now change on what's called a succeeding practice basis. The new person or people stand into the boots of the previous practice, including any undeclared issues in the filing cabinets. So it's an open-ended liability. You know, if you have a claim, it can be disproportionate, and that's probably unfortunately elevated a little bit through this renewal. So the consequence of a claim, you know, or a couple of notifications have become very significant in the last 2 or 3 months. I've said already, most are sold down on a succeeding practice basis. That's because the new owner can get the benefit of the name of the old owner. We don't have to transfer. We don't have to give the clients choices of transferring files to other firms. It's just a much simpler route. So it has become a little more difficult. We've spoken about that. So What practices are selling well at the moment? Conveyancing is strong, good conveyancing, particularly good probate practices, having a good wills cabinet, widespread of contacts. We've got good work in the pipeline. We can see fee income into the future. We've got small staff numbers. Length of service of staff is often an issue. You know, I'm in negotiations on a practice in Munster at the moment, 2 secretarial staff, 130 years, 150-year service. They're definitely significant negotiation items, as in, is a buyer prepared to take them over or not? You know, they all feed into the value of the practice and what a buyer, you know, if a buyer's going to take over, in this case, the buyer's going to take over the 30-year-old, the one with the 30-year service, but not the person with 50-year service. And they're going to factor into the purchase price, what, you know, some reduction for the fact that they're taking over 30 years of employment rights, and there is no retirement date now. So, you know, that's quite a significant liability. Other factors are, you know, if the owner is going to stay on for a bit, most people want that. Most owners want that too. They don't want to go from working 5 days a week to working no days a week. So some kind of support for maybe, you know, maybe on a wind down basis, maybe 6 months at 4 days a week, 6 months at 3 days a week, or whatever. So that works well. And practices that have some kind of niche, you know, be that family law, employment law, or whatever, on top of the general practice, are a little bit more attractive. And if we've good systems or IT, so we have good account systems, we have case management in, that all adds to the proposition and is going to, you know, will feed into whether we get a goodwill value or not. So if you're a potential buyer looking at buying a practice, what do you need to do? You need to do the following. You need to get a breakdown of the fee income by work type and by client. You need to review with the owner where the sources of work are coming from. So, you know, your typical private client practice could have an informal alliance with an estate agent, with a mortgage broker, with other solicitors where they're referring off the opposite side of family law. So you need to kind of understand where the business is coming from. You know, that they will have built up their own portfolio of clients over the years, and you know, where you go to migrate those relationships or those individual clients will be determined, you know, by where they're coming from. I think a brilliant exercise is actually just to lift up the fee notes for the last 6 or 12 months and just flick through them. Have a look at what's been charged. Is it a multitude of small fees? Are there some decent ones in there? Are we getting nice probate pricing? You know, are we doing a lot of nuisance work? You know, all of that. And you'll pick that up pretty quickly just flicking through an invoice file over the last number of months. I think you've got to factor in a working salary for your own time if you're a buyer. If you're a buyer and you're not an equity partner at the moment, you're being paid a salary. So you put in a base salary into the figures and see, you know, can it at least pay you that salary? I think the expectations if you're buying are that in the first year you'll earn pretty much nothing out of it, or small income. You would hope to be back up to your salary in the second year. And in the third year, you'd hope to be earning the salary you were earning and earning a profit above that. So, you know, it's not going to, if you're buying a law firm, there is a period of investment into it. If you're looking at a set of accounts and the owner owns the building, and just make sure there's either a rent charge in there, or if you have to pay the retiring owner a rent, you need to factor that into your calculations. I'm saying here, assume a 10% minimum fall in fees. That's probably a reasonable. Look at where you can save in overheads. Particularly younger buyers think that they can save massively on overheads. You know, there's probably something in there, but honestly, you know, you really need to concentrate on the fee income and maintaining the fee income. Nobody ever got very wealthy on shaving off overheads. It's really a concentration on the work and the sources of work and whether they're going to repeat. That'll give you the answer whether this is going to work for you or not. And having looked at all those things, you know, see if is there a living available. Bearing in mind, I'm saying you can expect to earn little in the first year, probably your salary back in the second year, and the third year you're into profit above your salary. Danger signs if you're a buyer: high dependence on one client or one source of work, sloppy or unfinished work. I will always advise you, if you come to me, I put huge caveats on looking at a practice where we have sloppy or unfinished work, or the practitioner has a bad reputation for not moving things on or finishing out files. It's almost a deal breaker. I mean, and certainly I'd be walking you very carefully through it, and we'd be adjusting our purchase price significantly, but I'd be probably more than likely advising you not to do it. Watch out for accelerated billing or window dressing. What do I mean by that? I mean, some practices are not that smart about deliberately not bringing fees across, and you can see things like them bringing lots of fees in when they know they're about to bring the practice to the market, but in fact some of the fees they're bringing across are actually fees, you know, that they've probably generated a year or two previously. So the practice actually looks stronger than it is. All they're doing is accelerating the timing of billing. So that's something to watch for. And to be honest, if you're seeing things like that going on and deliberate massaging of figures, it's probably time to move away from that one pretty quickly. Look out for fees to clients that are charged over or under market rates. Look out for potential competition from current staff. I mean, again, if I'm advising a vendor and there's a employed solicitor internally there, as I was yesterday in a firm in West Dublin, my advice to that particular person was, you've got to really offer it to your internal staff first. If that person says, I'm very happy as an employee, I don't want to buy the firm, I'll talk to the new owner as to whether they want me or not, that's all okay. And there's lots of, you know, that was a situation in that West Dublin practice we suspect yesterday, you know, but you know, I think first internal staff have to get first right of refusal. And if I was a buyer and I saw that, you know, there was an internal buyer, if I was acting for a buyer and I found that there was another internal buyer, there was an internal buyer potentially in the pot as well, I'd say, well, look, if that person doesn't get that, they're going to be quite angry, and quite a lot of the practice, they're probably going to set up very close, and you know, potentially a lot of the practice will walk with them. Also look at the age profile of the clients. I mean, there isn't probably you know, older in some ways is better, because you know, people are a little bit softer on price when they get older, they're at a different stage. But ideally you're looking for people at, you know, right through the different age profiles. How do you find a practice? So it's hard enough to find a practice. We probably have 15 to 20 practices for sale. I've got practices in Cork, Galway, Limerick, various parts of Dublin, Tipperary, Sligo, you know, right throughout the country. A lot of those they're never advertised publicly. You know, if I sit down with the vendor, we can usually identify between local firms and people that I know are looking, and people that I know want to move their employees in existing firms. We can usually get a decent list of potential buyers. So, you know, we probably do more than anybody else in the market. We definitely do more than anybody else in terms of buying, selling, or merging. Obviously, you've got the Law Society buy, sell, merge. That's very useful as well. And I suppose there isn't any discrimination in it, and you just have to be careful. And there can't, in fairness to the Law Society, there can't be discrimination in it. They can't say this is a good practice, that person's a messer. You know, that's not their role. Their role is to just make the information available between A and B. And you know, you've got to be discerning there in what you chase and what you spend time on. You can advertise either as a buyer or seller. You can make approaches directly or indirectly. The Gazette has occasional ads in it. And I think most of all, an intelligent search with somebody like ourselves that know and understand the market will probably come up with you know, 10 or 12 or 5 or 6 either firms, or if you're looking to buy, or potential buyers if you're looking for looking to sell. And we have people on our books all the time. What are the steps? I think you've got to do it with an advisor, somebody like ourselves. You get them on board. We look for the practice. We check it out informally. Every practice has a reputation. Every practitioner has a reputation. If we're interested, we would expect to sign a confidentiality undertaking. That works both ways. It's important for the vendor to realise that a lot of the buyers will be employees that are working for somebody else. So, you know, the confidentiality, and I understand that as well. And even if it's a practice that we've dealt with in the past, I absolutely understand that. We assess the practice. There's a negotiation phase. What I believe is the correct thing is that after a couple of meetings and some negotiation, there are basically headline terms agreed. And then the buyer does their due diligence. We don't do the due diligence and then agree the headline terms. We agree the purchase price. I think all buyers should be doing due diligence. I believe there's two sorts of due diligence, finance and files, basically. So you get somebody like ourselves to do the financial due diligence, and you get somebody like yourself to go in and look at files, see have they been properly run, look at the professional indemnity insurance record, look at the register of undertakings. All that kind of stuff is really important. And your insurer will ask you, have you done that? We close the deal, we have a formal agreement. Again, we do that. And then you either integrate or take over the practice. So, you know, the typical time there is 3 to 4 months. Can go on for a year, it can be done in 2 months. But, you know, a reasonably speedy process would be 3 to 4 months. But to achieve that, you've got to have both buyer and seller engaging in a process regularly. That can be difficult. Okay, just looking at it through the vendor's eyes for a minute, because we've looked at it through the buyer's eyes. There is a good market in most areas. Values aren't high. You know, buying a law firm is an incredibly good value proposition if you get it right. Incredibly good. Where else are you going to buy a 6-figure income for a relatively small amount of money, a 6-figure profit? I said there has been some values in some improvement in values and some goodwill returning back into the market. Lots of extra financing around at the moment. Really interesting result of COVID-19. So there are funds for new buyers and there are COVID support funds. So lots and lots of places to get money at the moment. So access to financing and appetite for financing has improved. We said 3 to 4 months was good. I'm saying their sales typically take 3 to 6 months. One of the things I find is that it's difficult to maintain confidentiality, and sellers get annoyed if it kind of leaks out that they're selling. And what happens is somebody's looked at it, or a neighboring firm has looked at it. They've kind of gone off the idea, and they meet somebody at a Christmas drinks party. Not going to happen this year, says you. And they say, oh, I hear Johnny's getting out or whatever. So if you're selling, what are your options? Local practices, practices looking to expand into the area, and employed solicitors and other firms who want to own. And, you know, sometimes I get people coming to me 4 or 5 years out and saying, I want to sell and I want to work on for 4 or 5 years. I think in most cases that doesn't really work. The purchaser probably wants the vendor gone within a year or two. So really we should be leaving that close to the end of close to the time that we want to move on. What does a seller want? They want a fair price. Often they want the opportunity to work on in a reduced capacity. A big thing for a seller is getting rid of the admin and the practice management and the dreaded insurance form and all of that stuff. So they want as much of the money front loaded as possible. The buyer wants the opposite. They want to defer it. They want a reputable buyer. You'll find with most sellers, you know, they're proud of their business. It's been their lifetime's work. They've spent 30 or 40 years building something. You know, it's like if you're a banker at the moment and where did you work? I worked for Bank of Ireland, or I worked for Anglo-Irish Bank. You know, there's quite a difference in how proudly you would say those two sentences to somebody. And, you know, most buyers live and work in the same locality. So, you know, they don't want clients that they've looked after for years coming up to them and saying, you know, you were great, Johnny, but you've sold on to Jimmy, and I'm afraid, you know, his service standards and his ways of doing things are not up to the same level at all. They want finality on risk and responsibility. Often want to work on reduced capacity. That usually suits both parties, and they want a clean break from administration. So what are deal breakers? If the personalities are incompatible, unless it's a very quick sale from A to B and A gets out very quickly, but, you know, you wouldn't even be so sure about that because, you know, I think it's probably not going to work if we don't get on, because, you know, it's just difficult to see A giving client endorsements to the same level to B as one would want. If there's PI issues, if we've badly run files, if there's the sole decision maker mindset, in other words, the person is difficult, the vendor is difficult to live with, if we've a difficult reputation, if we've doubts over trust, things like the window dressing, and potentially long employee service. So they're the danger signs. Positives: seller is proud of the practice and fussy on who gets it. Work levels are steady, allowing for an expected drop because of COVID. Sellers willing to stay on. They work together to maximize the opportunity, and we've good staff. Some interesting effects of COVID. If you're looking at a practice, it's absolutely normal if we've a 15 to 20% drop in fee income. One interesting side effect of that is that existing firms are more interested in buying practices. They see that they've a 15 to 20% gap in their own fee income, and buying a practice backfills that potentially. Okay. It also, there's more uncertainty amongst employees. I've at least one now owner of a law firm who thought they saw the writing on the wall for their own position, and they jumped to buy before they felt they were going to be pushed. So I think there are more employees looking to buy. Definitely more financing. There's a thing called the SBCI fund that can bring any of you through this. There's various COVID funds as well. And there's also more caution and value and cash flows. But, so it probably actually has improved the market. Another interesting one I saw recently is a vendor said to me, I'm not going to sell. Sure, what else will I be doing? I have nothing else to do with my time. Can't go on holiday. I can't travel outside my county. So I'm just going to stay in this until this is over. So in conclusion, I think there's a good market in most parts of the country. Some parts are difficult, but most parts of the country for buying or selling, if that's what you're interested in doing. I think there's really, really good value for buyers, and law firms are illogically cheap, but prices have improved a bit. I think, you need to get somebody on board, somebody that knows the market, knows how to assess value in a firm. I know people want to have just a price, and it doesn't kind of work like that. Like, you have to look at the constituent elements of a practice. But we've probably helped maybe 10 or 15 would-be buyers this year, young people that were buying firms for the first time, or existing firms looking to progress. And really, there's incredible value out there. Most sellers kind of do recognize where the market is, and as long as they feel they're being treated fairly and they like the person, there are deals out there to be done. We do it all the time. We act for buyers, sellers. Generally, the fees that we would charge would be something like 5,000 to 6,000 for a seller, because you're dealing with multiple parties. For a buyer, it's particularly if it's an employee, I know I've been as little as 800 euros, 1,000 euros for somebody start to finish, more like 1,500 euros, something like that. And my view is I hopefully have a client for life if I look after them well when they're on the way in. So so that is the presentation, I think. We do all sorts of things, ongoing advice. One interesting one there for you maybe is a practice advisory service. If you buy a firm, you'll automatically be offered that. It's subsidized by the Law Society. It's a really good half day for startups. And there's also a practice advisory for existing firms, which is another, so the one for startups is 150. The one for existing firms is 250. And for a half day of advice and looking at your practice and giving you one-to-one advice, it's really good value. So
David, that's great. A great whistle-top tour in.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's all it could be. Yeah. So yeah.
So what? There's a question there. What's influenced the fact that there's a value to goodwill now compared to a few years ago? We just have a couple of minutes left. So.
Yeah, I suppose improvement in profitability is a short answer to that. Very little profitability back in 2012, but figures have improved. We've had 5 or 6 years of improved profitability in the profession. So that's really what it is.
A question there, what's the most profitable and valuable type of practice that you've seen in sort of through all of the deals? Like what, I know you've...
the most profitable one is clearly a litigation practice. So MedNeg is the most profitable private client work out there, medical negligence, followed by PI. They're the most profitable practice. They're also the most difficult to buy because they have very significant outlays and the cases take a long time. So you know, I've a couple of buyers at the moment looking to buy litigation only practices. I say to those people, you'll be better off with some conveyancing and some probate in there as well, because your cash flows are more regular. So most profitable practices are definitely litigation. Probate, I think a mixed practice is the best buy for anybody, because otherwise you're looking at a long time before your money comes in and a lot of outlay funding.
Just one final question, David, just around limited liability partnerships. Do they influence or have an impact on the purchase of firms around liability issues or non-practice? Do you still have to be a solicitor to buy a practice, or is there any?
Yeah, they don't really, because, you know, most single owner firms aren't limited liability partnerships, and I understand can't be, even if there's a salaried partner in there as a second partner. So there's no great effect there. If it's a partnership, yes, Justin. If it's one person looking to buy with an existing firm, yes, I definitely think it gives a comfort to the buyer that isn't there otherwise, that they're personal assets. But most of them are single buys, you know, single owner buys or single owner sells. So, you know, there's only one owner. So, you know, that, but yes, if you're buying into a partnership or selling out of a partnership, it definitely gives comfort.
So there was in the steps of, in terms of the steps in buying, is the price negotiated prior to financial and legal due diligence?
Yes. Yeah, you know, the typical thing when you have a couple, you get financial details. You'd have a couple of meetings. You've got somebody like me on board sitting with you. We've put together what we think we're going to offer. We provisionally agree the price, and then we go in and we say, okay, we've agreed this price. Now, does the due diligence, does the fee income into the future, does the standard to which the files have been run, does that corroborate that we should pay that price or not? Most vendors don't want to let buyers in as well, you know, running the rule all over their practice, and potentially their own staff knowing that they're maybe selling. Sometimes they don't tell them right until the end. So yeah, you agree the price first and then you do the due diligence.
Have you seen many mergers?
There's a few starting. I think every existing firm has been, or sorry, most existing firms have been too busy to get their heads into merger. We've gone through a phase in the market, Justin, where getting the people to do the work has been the problem, not getting the work. Now that's turned a bit in. So now there's reasonable equilibrium between number of people available, solicitors and support staff, and you know, the volume of work coming out through the market. So but everybody was too busy to look at mergers. It's been a quiet merger market for a year or two.
All right. And the last question there, I'll be killed for going over time, but the Legal Services Act, will this affect, do you think, prices with more investors coming into the market via it? I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but
I don't think so. You know, I mean, the legal it's not allowing outside capital into law firms. So, you know, no, I think the answer is no, it won't.
All right, David. Well, thank you very much for your time. Next week, we have Lawrence Fennon's going to talk to us about the future of technology. So we'd love you to join us for that. You can register online. And David Rowe, thank you very much. I know it's been a short window, but I think you've imparted a huge amount of information. So
thank you. And thanks to everybody for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.